Today I'm showing you how the Epson V550 can be used to digitize slides, 35mm and 120 film. I'll also cover the settings that I use for each format as well as the average time that it takes for the different sizes to scan. Let's get digitizing! Hi everybody, my name is Nicole and I've been using the Epson V550 to scan slides and negatives in my family collection, and in this video I'll be showing you step by step how I do that. I've shown you my basic scanning process with the Epson V550 in an earlier video, and since then I've gotten several questions about scanning slides specifically, so we will be starting there. But first let's take a look at these two trays that came with the scanner. These are what I'll be using to load my film into so that the scanner is able to capture the images. And that is why it's a good idea at the beginning of each session to make sure that they are clean. They may have collected some dust or some dirt since they were last used, and I just want to do a quick wipe down with a microfiber cloth to make sure that I'm getting a clean scan. Now if you look here, you'll see that the trays are labeled with the letters A, B, and C. Each letter represents a different film format that can be loaded into the tray. So this tray is used for scanning 35mm film that's placed in these two slots here and labeled A. And then we have slides, which are placed over here on this side of the tray with the label C. This second tray is used to digitize 120 film and is labeled with the letter B. The letters will basically help you line the tray up correctly when you're placing it on the glass of the scanner. So once I have cleaned the trays, I will go ahead and do the same for the scanner. And I'm using this bulb as a blower throughout the session, as well as my microfiber cloth to make sure that the glass, my slides, and the negatives are clean of any smudges, dirt, or dust before I scan them. And the next important step before loading anything into the trays is to lift the cover of the scanner and then remove this document mat right here by sliding it up and out. I like to give the transparency window unit here a clean as well, and this document mat will stay off the entire time that I'm scanning slides and negatives. So I have everything I need here ready and accessible to start digitizing, along with my gloves, which aren't necessary for handling just slides, but I am wearing them to prevent any smudges from transferring to the negatives while I'm handling them. Once the scanner is connected to my laptop and I've powered it on, I can then go ahead and open up the Epson scanning software. And while that's starting, I'm going to load my first tray. Since we're starting with slides, we will be using this tray first with the letter C. And for slides in particular, the tray does go on the flatbed before loading it with the slides. So we're going to take this C tab on the tray that we see. It's going to be lined up here with the letter C on the left side of the flatbed. And once that tab is in place in its seat, it sort of secures it on the glass. And you can see now how the tray helps line the slides up with the transparency window above right here on the lid. So I've placed my clean tray directly on the glass of the clean scanner bed, and then I will go ahead and take my slides and load those next. I've made sure to gently clean them with my microfiber cloth so they are ready to go. The carrier can hold up to 4 slides at a time, and as I'm loading them onto the tray, I'm making sure to orient them correctly, placing the long edge of the slide down in the carrier like so, and making sure that the slide is also flush with the glass. The emulsion side should be placed facing up, meaning the shiny or the glossy side should be facing down on the scanner. It's not always easy to tell, but sometimes the writing on the slide itself might help you figure out the front from the back. And in that case, be sure to place the front side down on the glass. It does help to take note of the image. It should appear backwards once the slide has been placed down. When I have all of my slides loaded into the carrier, I close the cover gently and head over to my laptop to adjust the settings before I start scanning. Slides are easy because you can simply select slides from the scan settings drop down right here, and it automatically loads what you need in the rest of the fields. Document source right here should have transparency unit selected. Document type should have color positive film for slides, and image type has 48-bit color selected. Scanning quality is set to high, and I'm scanning as a TIFF to get an image that isn't compressed. And these are the scanning settings that I am generally happy with, but if you're not sure what your scanning needs are, like what file format to save your photos as, you can go ahead and watch my video on what to know before scanning family photos to get a better idea of what might suit your needs. Once I have adjusted the settings, I go ahead and click preview. And the preview usually takes between 30 seconds to a minute to load. Once it does, I can now see my slides on the thumbnails over here. And I can change the thumbnail grid if I want to get a closer look, or I can rotate the images if I need to. I can pick which images it scans by clicking that little X in the right-hand corner of the photo if I don't want to scan that particular image at this time. I personally ignore the advanced settings, but I do know that some people like to use these different features such as the unsharp mask or tone correction, so that's up to you to experiment with as you create your own scanning process, but I prefer to scan the image as it is and then do any editing after the image is digitized in something like Photoshop. Once everything looks good on the thumbnails, I will go ahead and click scan. And then with these settings, it usually takes around 1 minute to scan each slide. So it's taking up to a minute for a preview, about 30 seconds to load the tray, 4 minutes to scan the 4 slides, and then another 30 seconds or so to reset the tray. So I'm looking at about 6 minutes or so for every set of 4 slides, meaning that if I'm going to, let's say, do a 30-minute scan session, I could scan around 20 slides in about a 30-minute scan session. So once I have completed scanning a round of slides, I will lift the carrier from the glass first so that I can collect the slides more easily before placing the tray back on the glass to load more. Technically, if I didn't have gloves on, I could leave the tray on and pick the sides up this way too. It's just not as easy to do that with gloves on, so this is how I'm doing it. Now for 35mm negatives, I'll be using the same tray, only this time I'm going to use this section of the carrier, the area labeled A. And unlike the slides, I will be loading it prior to placing it on the flatbed. I've made sure that my negatives are clean, so now it's time to take this top part here, pop it up, and then I can load up to 2 strips of 35mm negatives into these slots. As I do, I am loading the film with the glossy side down and the emulsion side up, or so that the image appears backwards when it's lying down on the tray. I'm also making sure that the negatives are resting on this little lip area that you can see here on either side, before I then go ahead and close this top part back down and snap it into place along the edges. That ensures that the tray has a firm hold on the negatives. I can then move the tray over to the bed of the scanner, and this time I'm lining the carrier up with the tab A for 35mm film. Now the negatives are aligned, as you can see, with the transparency window above, and I can go ahead and gently close the lid. I'm going to go back to the Epson scanning software now so I can adjust the settings for 35mm color negatives specifically. Document source should be set to transparency unit here, and you'll see I have 3 options for the document type. I'm selecting color negative film for the color negatives that I just loaded, and I want the image type to be set to 48-bit color. I'm setting the resolution to 3200, and then everything else can stay as is. I'm ready to go ahead and preview and scan. So digitizing 2 strips of 35mm film like this with these settings will take an average of 1 minute per photo. I have a total of 8 photos here, so if we are sticking with the 1 minute preview, 30 seconds to load, 30 seconds to unload theory, it takes about 10 minutes to digitize 2 strips of 35mm film. So a 30-minute scan session would produce 24 photos. And that is how you scan 35mm negatives on the V550 using this tray. To scan 120 film, I'm going to use this second tray with the label B. I've used my cloth to make sure that the film is as clean as can be, and then I load it into the carrier like this, keeping these same orientation rules in mind as before by placing the emulsion side up. So to open the carrier, I pop this top part up by using these levers to get a good grip on either side. You lift it up, you load the film into the tray so that it's resting on the lip on either side here. And then I will lower the top part back down and snap it into place along the edges here. Now that my film is secure in the tray, it's time to move it over to the flatbed to scan. I'm going to line the B tab up with the B seat over here on the left side of the glass, and once that's secure, I gently close the lid. Over on the Epson scan software, most of the settings are going to remain the same as they were for the 35mm film. Transparency unit should be selected, but the document type might change depending on the type of negative that you're scanning. So if I'm working on a black and white negative, let's say, like this one for example, I would go ahead and select black and white negative here. The film that I have just loaded is color negative film, so that's what I'm going to be selecting for this scan. Now that my settings are sorted out, I'm going to hit preview and then I will scan. It takes about 1 minute per image for 120 film with these settings, and when I factor in the minute or so setup getting the film in and out of the tray, plus up to a minute for a preview, I'm looking at around 5 minute scan time to digitize these 3 120 film images. That would give me around 18 digitized images after a 30-minute scan session. So if we were going to compare all 3 formats using these settings for a 30-minute scan session, we would get either 20 images from slides, 24 images from 35mm, or 18 images for 120 film. As you can see, none of these options are all that fast, but it does produce a good quality result at home, and it gives you some control over the settings for the image. Negatives are a great thing to have as the original source material, and in this way you can have more control over the reproduction of the image. So take this photo, for example. You can see that the quality is not great. It's yellowed, it's not very sharp, even maybe a little pixelated looking. And since I found the negative in the same envelope with this photo, we can go ahead and load it into the carrier and see what the quality of the negative is. And we can determine whether we can make a better image out of it than the one we already have. So you can see here that yes, the negative does produce a better image than the printed copy that I have here. And of course, the negatives do need to be in good condition in order to get a good copy. It's possible that they've been bent, scratched, or cracked if they weren't stored properly, like this strip here, unfortunately. That's always a shame. Lastly, I will say, by the way, if you're curious whether you can scan any other variations in size, I have a lot more of these film strips that are in good condition, but since they don't fit any of the slots on the trays, I have been experimenting with just putting them directly on the glass. But unfortunately, anytime I've tried to use the transparency unit without a tray, I end up getting an error. So if I try placing the 110 film in the 35mm tray, for example, it does scan the image and you can see it, but it comes out funky, as you can see. So same as when I tried to scan this 116 film and it cut the photo in two. It's just not equipped to auto detect the size of an image outside of what it was intended for. Even something like this, I've gone ahead and placed it on top of the tray, making sure that it's lined up with the transparency window above, and then closed the lid and tried to scan it that way. And then this is what it came up with. So you can see it's really only built to digitize these specific formats: slides, 35mm, and 120 film. The Epson V550 has been a great option for creating quality digital images at home, and I've been experimenting with a few other options for digitizing slides and negatives since I do have these different sizes that I want to properly digitize, and I also have a ridiculous amount of 35mm negatives now that I need to go through. So at 24 images for every 30 minutes, I want to see if I can find a faster alternative without compromising the quality. It would take me an extensive amount of time to make through all these negatives using the V550, and it gets tedious loading the negatives into the carrier after you've done it about 100 times. And that's just a bit of the pros and cons. I am considering trying another gadget or two that's primary function is to digitize negatives, as well as possibly trying a DSLR method. So I will let you all know what I end up coming up with. But in the meantime, thank you for watching and keep up with the great work.